Hello, and welcome to the Catching the Octopus podcast. Here, we will explore how connecting inward gives us an advantage outward. We openly talk about the obstacles and challenges and difficulties that life throws our way and how they become moments of gratitude and things that can benefit us when we look back on our lives. I'm your host, Naomi Hurley, and it is my mission to bring you top quality guests that will share with you openly their obstacles and also the techniques they use to go inward that strengthens the way that they serve themselves and others at the highest level. Thank you for joining. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to Catching the Octopus podcast. This morning's guest is Jayden Williamson, and Jayden grew up in the Bunbury area, starting his musical journey at 8 years of age. So he was learning to play the drums then, and by age 13, he'd already started gigging and playing locally with cover bands. So at 18, he successfully auditioned for the role in the Southwest Blues Clubhouse band Homebrew, and he worked with them for the next 5 years. So this led to him working with a variety of great musicians, including Flamin Crows, Dimond Dave and the Doodaddies, Anita Downes, KNiKi and Mike Beale. I just make sure I say that right. And then Jayden moved to Perth to study at WAAPA. So for those who don't know WAAPA, WAAPA is the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts. And this allowed Jayden the chance to expand his musical horizons and work with more of WA's top blues and jazz artists, which included Lee Sappho, the Shin Kickers, and Nicola Milan. So when Jayden moved back to Bunbury in 2012, he quickly became the most in-demand drummer, and he was working with everyone in the Southwest who needed a drummer. And that included Big Steve Spouse Band, Nitronet, Night Game, Skeleton Jump, Michelle Spriggs, Jazz Strix, Rastatrix, Jazz Do It, the Jones Facility and Sway, and while playing in his own bands at the same time, iFunk and Blue Seas. So it's during this time that Jayden started developing the idea of running his own music school. And in 2017, he returned to his old stomping grounds of Australian Senior High School, and he took up a part-time role as a classroom and instrumental music teacher. So over the years, this later developed, and now Jayden's running the arts department. But later that same year, the seeds were planted for his own music school to finally take shape. So in 2018, JD's music tuition officially opened its doors, and it welcomed 42 students within its first week with 6 staff members. But now it's growing, and it's growing to over 250 students with 16 staff, and he's building a retail selection. So after post-COVID in 2023, Jayden has been now able to work with such artists as Tez Malloy, Lane Wolfe, Emily Gillinew, and David Rastrix. Please excuse me if I got that wrong. While still working with his own band ESP. And these days you can find Jayden gigging just about every weekend. And during the week, he keeps himself busy as the arts operation coordinator at Australian Senior High School, which is one of only 2 music specialist schools outside of Perth. And you'll also find him during the week working as a director of operations at JD's Music Tuition, which is the largest private music school outside of Perth. So pretty impressive little history there, Jayden.
There's a lot to it, that's for sure. But it's everything that I've done goes back to music and the love of music that I had as a kid. So that's where it all comes from. And technically you can argue it's 3 jobs nowadays. One is the government job as a teacher, one is the business owner, and one is the musician. But all 3 are so much fun that I love doing them. So keep doing them.
And I mean, I can relate because I keep myself busy doing things I love as well, right? And we've been talking about catching up for an interview of some kind for probably about 2 years now, maybe?
I want to say it's at least 18 months. Yeah. So yeah, a little while.
It just hasn't kind of happened. So I first met Jayden when I was learning to play the ukulele back when he was just starting out in that shed, right? With those 6 staff members.
Yes, back in Devonport in the shed next to I think it's Eco Car Wash from memory. I should know the car wash, but it's the car wash on the corner there in Devonport. So a good mate of mine, Ben Talbot, was the one who helped initiate it. He owned the shed and he had a few rooms in there that he set up for me. And he said, look, you can go in there and start the school from there. And it was literally I think it was 85 square meters of room we had, and there was a couple of teaching rooms and aircon in some rooms, not aircon in other rooms, and that sort of thing. But it gave us a starting point. With we didn't have a lot to begin with, but it gave us a home to start with. So, and with those 6 staff members, as we know, it's grown over the last 5 years. So, but yeah, it was humble beginnings, that's for sure. So.
Yeah, and although, my ukulele playing is now just confined to my lounge room, my daughter now comes in and takes lessons. So you'd probably see families come through,
We do. Yeah, we've still got a lot of students that are still back from those original 42 students in the shed days. And there's some of them where they're either adult students who are still learning, or they were 8, 9, 10-year-old kids who are now teenagers still learning. And there's one family we've got, for example, who the son was learning back with us originally, I think from week 1 of that year as well. So one of the original students, he was, I want to say 7 years of age back then, because he's 12 or 13 now. So he could have been 7 or 8. And his younger sister's also learning at the moment as well. So, but that family's been with us for a long period of time since the start. And his elder sister, I think for a while, was also doing lessons. So, there was 3 kids in that family that have gone through the school over the past 5 years.
And I find, like, with music, it's not, yes, the skills are great, and yes, playing with yourself, playing by yourself or in bands and gigging is great, but it just, I'm all about energy and vibration, right? And the vibration that comes from music just takes you to different places.
Yep. And it's definitely, there's so many elements to it in the way that music operates as such. It's a discipline in the sense that you've got to sit there and practice to get better, but it's a creative art because you're creating something that's spontaneous as well. It's different to if you're painting where you've got it there permanently. If you're just doing it on the spot by yourself with no recording, that's a little moment in time you capture as a musician. And that can happen to the best of us in recording sessions. It can happen to us in, on gigs. It can happen in rehearsal rooms. There's a famous story of a band doing it in a recording session and it being absolutely perfect, and then the recording tape failing at the last minute, and then the band being deflated because it didn't happen. So, and that was with the Miles Davis Quintet years ago. So, it happens at different times. And there's one that I've been a part of, only one I think of, that in a recording session, we stopped and at the end of it all just looked and went, "Oh, that was pretty cool, wasn't it?" So,
Don't jinx it.
Exactly. You're always searching for those moments, and you've got it when everyone in the band just freezes and looks at each other. That's that moment because everyone's thinking the same thing. You don't have to communicate. You just know that something felt different about it. So, and that's one of the special things with music, that it can happen just by yourself. If you're sitting there, in your bedroom playing your guitar, for example. Another example, my favorite song of all time is "Lightning Crashes" by Live. That was written literally with Ed sitting on his bedroom at 22 years of age, just picked up his guitar and started playing, and then went, "Hang on,
Really?
I'm onto something here." So, it didn't come from sitting in a band rehearsal or a long process or anything like that. He'd just come off tour, sat on his bed, picked up his guitar, wanted to play for the enjoyment factor more than anything, and what came out was Lightning Crashes. So.
Yeah. And I just love the teachers that you attract, because they're all passionate about music as well. And, when I dabbled in violin there for a little while until I had my shoulder injury, the teachers I had were fantastic. Sabine, the experience she had, and then John as well. And Amy coming in. I mean, they were all just next level teachers. And it was kind of a little bit deer in the headlights. I'm like, oh, am I worthy of being taught by these stars,
There are some of them that their background is astonishing, and we're very, very lucky. But everyone who's working at JD's Music Tuition at the moment is very passionate about music, and the majority of them are teaching elsewhere as well during the day. So, I've got my role at Australian Senior High School, but Amelia works as the music teacher at Our Lady of Mercy College. I think from memory, Mark, Amelia, and Aaron all work at Our Lady of Mercy as a tutor, and Grace Christian as a tutor. So they're all working as music tutors as well. And a lot of them are also gigging on weekends and that sort of thing too. You look at John, for example, his background. We've got this wonderful poster of Wazzo from 1979, I think it is, on the wall. And John's in second row violin there from his time at Wazzo. And his background is that he's played in just about every major orchestra in Australia. It's easier to list the ones he hasn't played in than to list all the ones he has. So Sabine, she spent most of her life in New South Wales after graduating from the Conservatorium of Music in Germany. And, she played at the Opera House regularly. That was her day job, basically. So she'd teach at a lot of schools and a lot of grammar schools and private schools and that sort of thing in the Sydney area. But she was working with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra, and she was gigging at the Opera House, and she was gigging in all sorts of amazing venues over on the East Coast and that. So, You know, they're players that they've done the full-time work as musicians as well.
Yeah. And look, in my career, I've found that I need to be in a certain place to attract those great people, right? And build that community. So there's obviously something going on within you as well, that you're actually attracting these people to come in to be able to teach all these students.
I say pure fluke, but
No.
I've met a lot of them through music though, which has been the great thing. So Sabine, for example, she was the first one for violin that I wanted to get on board for violin teaching. And I met her, I want to say back in 2013 when, or maybe even a touch earlier. So it was back when the Southwest Philharmonic or Philharmonic Southwest was being developed, and she jumped on board because she was semi-retired. She's been semi-retired for a few years, but musicians never truly retired. So,
No.
and so she was still teaching a little bit, and she wanted to do a bit more performing, and this was her way to give back to the community to help grow and improve classical music and string music and that sort of thing in the Bunbury and Southwest area. And they needed a percussionist as a fill-in for a couple of shows, and she contacted me. I met her, lovely person, had no idea about her background at that point, just knew her and became friends. And then I thought she'd be wonderful to have on staff at the school. It took, I think, about 9 months of me pestering her before she said yes, because she was always too busy. And then she called up randomly one day and she said, "No, Jayden, it's time to take you up on the offer." And I said, "What's changed your mind?" And she said, "You don't have a strings teacher yet, and I need to be the one to teach strings to start with." And I said, "I told you that 9 months ago." And that's when I sat down with her and talked about the plans of the school and what we do. And that's when she told me her background, and I sat there and went, "Wow, okay." So I always knew that she was a great violinist, and always knew, you know, she was a wonderful person and she'd be great at teaching and all that. And never seen her in a teaching setting, but knew she'd be wonderful just because of the type of person she is.
Yeah.
But then to hear that, you know, her background, I've got a degree in music from the Conservatorium of Music in Germany, and then that she used to play at the Opera House, and she played with Sydney Symphony Orchestra and Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, and listing off all these things and achievements she did. And I just sat there and I went, "Geez, we're lucky to have such a talented musician in the Bunbury area." And it still surprises me. There's people who pop up randomly in the Southwest where, you know, their background, you just speak to them for a bit and find out what they've done and go, "Oh, you've done it at the highest level with music." So
yeah, and you know, the Southwest of Western Australia is a beautiful spot, so it's no doubt that they all come and hang out here and enjoy what we do. So with building the music school and building your music career, what do you reckon is the biggest obstacle you've had to overcome?
COVID was a big one, that's for sure. I think a lot of people would say that. So, we second week in COVID, we thought that, you know, we may not open our doors again in 3 weeks' time. So, that was probably, looking at everything, that was probably the toughest, from a business point of view anyway, purely because we were only 2 years in at that point, and we just started to expand rapidly. So we'd gotten out of the shed, we'd moved into town. We just signed a lease to where we are now, which is a wonderful location at 27 Carey Street. We had a building that when we went to look at it, we literally thought someone had made a music school for us. It was too perfect to be true. There were a few things that we did, but there was not a lot. There was 11 teaching rooms there ready to go, basically. We had a band room or a function room. We had an area where we could set up retail. We had a great reception area, and we just thought this is ideal. 6 weeks in, all of a sudden, COVID's officially a global pandemic, and then the week after, there's a few students not coming in, and then the weekend of that, Scott Morrison addresses the nation. Everything changed, and my phone just went
crazy.
Every message,
Bing,
every
bing,
phone
bing,
call, every email. Yep. So I remember at the time after that announcement that Scott Morrison went for a walk just to clear my head a little bit, came home, phoned every staff member and spoke to all of them personally and said, "We have no idea what the future holds. I honestly don't know if I can say that we'll survive this. I don't know if we'll be okay." I had no answers whatsoever. I said, "All I know is that we're going to tackle it head on come Monday morning straight up and go from there."
Yep.
Monday morning, walked into my day job at Australian High. My first class of 24 kids, I had 2.
Yeah,
and I realized, okay, this is definitely a different world we're living in. So, and then by the time I got into the school, it was us teachers were there practically, and that was it. It was very quiet. So, I remember that Monday afternoon, 9 of us were in, and we sat down after we finished, and we knocked off at about 6:30, I think. We all just had a beer, had a toast, and went to everything we've achieved so far, and if this is it, this is it, because we genuinely thought then that this could be the last time we're all together in the same room for quite some time. And it was, we went online the following week and a few days later and whatnot, and it was still a good 8 weeks until we got lessons regularly happening back at the school and not every tutor returned. And then it was probably 12 weeks, I think, from that initial date to when we were back to fully functioning as we were. And at that point, the astonishing thing, and this is the amazing thing out of the whole situation, we had 167 students at the point of when COVID hit, and we returned with 164 of those 167 plus new ones.
Awesome. So you retained pretty much all of them.
Yeah, it's every holidays, you always lose a few students from term to term. We do our lessons on a term by term basis, and term 4 is often the quietest one because people take time off and that sort of thing, because Christmas holidays coming up, early holidays, all that. But that one, we thought, no, we're going to lose a lot of people here. And we thought we were expecting half our numbers, but we ended up having close to about 80 students online during that time anyway. And then with students returning, we only lost 3 students who didn't come back from the pre-COVID time to when we were fully back functioning.
Right.
From a business point of view, that was definitely the hardest period we've had. But it restored faith in the community when that sort of thing happens, where there's so many people who are supporting us through it as well. It was truly amazing. We thought that we'd have a lot of people who would step away just because of family reasons or uncertainty around work or uncertainty around health. It was such a weird time for everyone because no one had lived anything through like this. The last time was the 1920s with the Spanish flu, and we weren't around back then. So
no, I wasn't.
No, none of us were. So we had no idea what to expect, and just the fact that we were able to return and then continue to grow from there. Our restrictions at that point were what COVID had in place, but we were still able to have students coming in and lessons happening and that sort of things. So that's definitely been the hardest from a business point anyway.
Yeah, I loved how you pivoted in that space. And I feel like not just from the business perspective, but it really served all the students, right? Because we were saying before how important music is for our overall well-being. And I know when we were, because Zoe was doing violin at that stage, and I know when we were in that space and in lockdown, it was really a great outlet to be able to do some music, and to be able to have the lessons, interact with people and all those sorts of things. So I feel like you were serving the community more so than running a business at that point.
It was definitely different because it was one of the only things people could do. We couldn't go out and sit at the coffee shop. You could go get takeaway coffee and that was it. So, there's the famous kebab story in New South Wales at that time as well. So, you can't stand there for too long. So, with us, we could actually do this. We could actually be online for them. And, I could be sitting here saying, okay, Naomi, pick up your guitar now. This is a G chord. This is a D chord. We could still actually have a lesson in an online setting. And students were still able to do something that they enjoyed. So, I was a mad football supporter, but I couldn't even watch football because that had stopped. So, and then you couldn't even go out and have a kick with someone because after 30 minutes, you got to go back inside. So, where you could sit there and you could play your instrument for hours if you wanted to. So, and I know for me as a growing musician and musical director at that time, I worked a lot on my conducting skills and did a lot of development with that because I had all the time in the world to do it. So it made it easier to work on those skills and to develop a little bit more, which again comes back to music. So it's something that did keep a lot of people happy and almost sane, I guess, at that point too. So
no, most definitely. And so did you have, what do you feel like, how did that strengthen your connection inward, like having to go through that process and think about and pivot and come up with those ideas, work with the people, all that sort of thing?
It felt very daunting to begin with. And it was very much you always sort of plan for stuff to happen. You can't plan for the world to stop. No. And essentially that's what happened. The world stopped for 3 months. So it was that walk that I went on before I called on my staff. I went with my partner, Shannon, and we just spoke about, we need to find ways as a society more than anything in this in terms of developing how we get through. And for me as a business owner, it was sitting there going, I can't feel like the world's ending. I can't feel that our time's up. I have to support all our staff in this. I have to support all our students. And I was upfront with them saying that we don't know what the future holds because we really don't know. But whatever happens, we're going to attack this the best we can and do it in a positive way and try and build out of this. Deep down, I knew how close we were to shutting down. Not a lot of the students and staff knew that. They just knew that, oh yeah, we're here this week. We're not here next week. We don't know what's happening after that. We could be online. We could be back in 3 weeks.
Jayden, where are we? Yeah, what's happening next week, Jayden?
Yep.
And then they forget, they just stop thinking about it, right? Yeah.
Yep. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there negotiating a few things behind the scenes and that, and then panicking and that, and in constant contact with the banks and the landlord and all that, and going, okay, now we can get to this month and get to that. So, you're planning all that. So, it made me more confident as a business owner coming out of it, because it was such a challenge at that point, and it was such an unknown challenge. And it's not something where, I've got a good friend who I speak to about business all the time, because he's been doing it for 15, 16 years, something like that. But I couldn't go to him and say, what do you do in this situation? Because he was the same. He goes, I don't know. I'm asking you. So, you couldn't go to anyone to ask for advice or help, or you couldn't look at something and go, okay, this is what's been done before. Let's go from there. So it was very much fly by the seat of your pants and develop your own take on it and your own views. I just stayed in constant contact with all the staff. Everything we do at the school goes through the school, but a lot of teachers were contacting students themselves at times, because it was such an overwhelming workload with what we had. And I was contacting all the tutors were contacting all the students, and we were just going from there week by week, day by day sort of thing.
So to me, some of the key points out of that was like consultation, collaboration, and just trust in each other and in the process, and taking some risks, really.
Yep. And that's what we had to do. We knew it was a team thing. Our initial thought for the school is that it's a collaborative music school of the best tutors in the area. And that's what it was. It was collaboration. We sat there talking to each other. We were calling each other. There was a wonderful Zoom meeting where it looked like the opening scene of the Muppets at one point, because there's 12 staff on the screen and all that. And we're sitting there going, right, guys, here's what we're doing. This is what the plan is and all that. So, being Zoom and where everyone was at that point, one person's outside on their porch having a coffee. I'm sitting there in the school, and someone else is in their bedroom. Someone's in their home music school and all that. And, we're all just talking to each other going, right, here's the plan of attack for this week. This is what we need to do. Any thoughts, any ideas? And, we developed it collectively. So I can't take credit for the whole thing to get through. It very much was a collective approach. We had ideas that some people bounced off, and we then further developed to see what we could do. The initial thought originally, before it became a global pandemic, was, if this gets out of hand, let's look at Zoom. And we did trial a few things with Zoom lessons, Skype lessons, and another online program as well. And Zoom seemed to work well for everyone, which was great. And one of the issues was, for certain instruments, the sound cutting in and out. So working with different microphone settings and different settings on Zoom and all that to make it work. As a drum teacher, that was always fun when the kid would start playing and then you'd hear doof doof ka. And that was it. So you could see them keep playing and then no sound on that. So having developed that, because of the in-house settings of Zoom, would cut out at certain frequencies and volume. So but we were able to develop it and work through situations and that sort of thing. So with just about every teacher going online and everyone getting on board, that was the big thing. We all worked together and we all need to get through this together, and we did. So it was very much a collaborative effort, and we had to trust each other in the process with what we do.
Yeah. And so what if you could go through over your life and have a look at it from an up, what is it called? An up perspective, looking down, that sort of thing.
Yeah, overview of it. Yeah.
Thank you. If you had an overview and looking from above, what would you say would be, you go through maybe 5 challenges in your life that you actually ended up becoming grateful for?
One was definitely when I was 16. I had an arm injury and I couldn't play drums for 7 months. That was one, because it made me a little bit more grateful to being able to play drums. It was very frustrating having my arm in a cast and everything, and not being able to move my wrist, and not being able to play, and not being able to practice. And if I did, I'd be in consistent pain and all that sort of thing. So that was one where, again, it was a challenge to overcome. I was still able to practice, left hand techniques, feet techniques, all that sort of stuff. But and even had to do a couple of gigs one-handed at the time, which was fun. Mimicking Def Leppard's drummer there.
I was going to say, cool. Def Leppard, look at you go.
and then years later saw him do it live and went, oh, that's what I have to do. I remember that next time. So that was good, because it was a time where it was a case of, well, I can't do what I want to do, but I have to grow from this and learn from it. And then I had a bit more of an appreciation when I got back to playing, and I also had some good friends as well at the time that helped me get through it and that sort of thing too. So that was definitely one. My first period at university, that was definitely a challenging time. you hear stories before going of people who study things like law and music together as a double degree. And they come out and they say music was the harder one.
Yeah.
And you sit there and you go, no, it's not. And then you get there and you go, oh, it is.
Oh,
it
maybe,
is.
yeah.
You don't really know how challenging it is to study an arts or performing arts based subject until you actually get there. And you go through school and we're always taught about the mesh subjects with math, English, science, and HAS, and the study we've got to do there. And I look at some of the sciences and go, geez, you got to be smart to do some of the chemistry stuff and the physics stuff and all that, and the intro calculus stuff we're doing in math and that sort of thing. I'm sitting there going, how can these other degrees not be as challenging as music? But there were 3 or 4 circumstances where I heard of guys that were doing double degrees with music and law, or music and medicine, or music and physics or something. And they all say music's the harder one. And I couldn't for the life of me work out why. And then I walk into my first lesson and I went, oh, it'll make sense now. You very quickly, what you don't know, you learn very quickly. So, with everything else, it's very much, there's so much that what we do when we learn that 2 + 2 is 4, it's very mathematical, it's very logical, and that creative arts is not. And that's where it does get challenging, because when you're sitting there, you might be doing something that you think is wonderful, but if your audience doesn't like it, well, it sucks. So, whereas you could be playing something where you go, I'm not very fulfilled creatively and that sort of thing, but if the audience is loving it, that's a positive. You're going to get a gig again. So, and then at a university level where you're working with lecturers and tutors who have done it at the highest level, where they've toured Europe, they've toured America, they've played with all great musos and that sort of thing. You're hearing them talk about and criticize your playing to the nth degree of what you're doing, and you go, I'm not very good all of a sudden. So
self-doubt.
Exactly. And I was very lucky in the first ensemble I got put in. We didn't know at the time, but the ensemble that we were in, myself and my students that I was in with, we were sitting there as the top auditionees for our instrument for that year. And so I'm sitting there with the guy who was the top auditionee for bass and top for piano and top for saxophone and that. So all these great players that are my age or around my age, and we're sitting there playing music, and we're getting told to the nth degree of everything that we're doing wrong and what we can improve on and that sort of thing, going, this is what you need to do as a musician. This is how you need to develop as a performer. This is what you're not doing as a soloist. You shouldn't be doing this. And it's all the stuff that we're, the basics are there, but it's everything to the moment of the one note you hit the ride cymbal, and all of a sudden it's out by a hemi, demi, semi-quaver, and it's that much too loud, and like to the finer tuning of everything. And you're sitting there going, you do have that doubt, because it is so rigorous and so correct. It's not like you're learning something, you research something, and then you know the answer to it. It is, you've got to develop that. And just because you've been told that doesn't mean you're going to come back tomorrow knowing it. 3 months later, after practicing for 3, 4, 5 hours a day, you can do that. So whatever we were doing at uni, we still had the recommendation of minimum 3 hours a day practice in your first year, 4 in your second year, 5 in your third year, that sort of thing. So and the first years, the timetable's not nice for first years. Fourth years, they got the best timetable, because they're just about to graduate, they're out there gigging and all that. So their timetable is 9 to 12:30, 3 days a week, and then that's it. So whereas us, we had a class at 8:30, 2 hours break, another class at 12:30, 4 hours break, and then another class at 5:30 or something like that. So we're sitting there going, how can we get practice time in our timetable? And we've got to go on site, off site, all that. So it's your first year. They cut it through with the first years. You for sure if you get the second year, you're definitely doing something well. So so that was definitely a bit of an eye opener and challenge as well. So
I can relate, probably not with the music element, but when I did my HR degree. For me, that was really quite easy. So I'm not saying business degrees are easy, but for me, I kind of breezed through it. And I do have a bit of a natural ability for the academic stuff, so I need to credit that. And then when I went to do my psych degree, I'm like, I can do it while I'm still working full time in this high pressure job and having a family. And my first unit, I was just like, I had no idea. And there was one unit called business statistics. Yeah, I think it was the business statistics one, or they were looking at, no, not business statistics, but it was research methods and statistics. So looking at how they do all the research methods, and 50% of the cohort dropped out from that unit alone. And so, yeah, it's persevering through it, right? Like I thought about it. I thought, no, I'm not up for this. Like, this is too much. But after I got through that, the muscles that it strengthens, right? And that discipline and your focus, and then you go from self-doubt to, yeah, I'm awesome. Like, and just drives you on, right?
Yep. And I know that as well from my teaching studies compared to my music studies. You know, the first assignment I had to hand in for my teaching degree, the very first one was something where I did it the night before and I went, yep, this will be fine. And I knew it would be fine. I didn't know I'd get the mark I got. I ended up getting a high distinction. So it was like, awesome, brilliant.
Yeah.
But yeah, the night before I just did it because I went, okay, I know the answers to this. This is fine. This is no problem. Whereas I remember at uni as a music student doing something the night before and then going into the assessment the next day, and 2 minutes into it, they stopped and they said, come back next week when you practiced.
Yeah. Dong dong.
You know, it was like, no, you're not at the level you're supposed to be for this assessment. So
not winging this degree, right?
Correct. Yeah. So, did you start in week 1? Yeah, a little bit. So, it was something where, you had to do from day one, you had to do everything. Whereas the teaching, because there's still elements in teaching, which is creative, obviously, but when there's certain things where you've got to write theories, once you know it, you know it. So, I went, okay, well, I know this stuff. It's no problem. I was at that point already applying it in my day job. So I thought I'll do the assignment the night before because I've got this. Hey, I'm running a business. I've got this gig to prepare for, and I've got this classroom to manage tomorrow morning. So let me worry about all that first, get to the degree and go to the assignment, and then do it the night before after 3 hours, proofread it. Yep, this is okay. And I went, I'll pass because that's all you need to do uni. You just need to pass. And I ended up getting, I think it was the second highest mark in the class, but it was a high distinction. And just looking back going, that was one of those moments where I went, this is where music is different compared to every other degree, because in education, when I sat there and went, I knew the theory and I could do it. This is what that lawyer was talking about. This is what that doctor was talking about. This is what, they knew it and went, oh yeah, we can pass. Whereas with music, very different.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're enjoying this podcast and you want Naomi or any of her guests featured on your podcast or as a keynote speaker at your next event, you'll find their contact details included in the show notes. If you'd like to learn more about how you can work with Naomi individually or as part of your strategy to improve leadership in your business, then review the courses, offers and services at getupandgoconsulting.com.au.
So, well, that's 2 good ones. What would be a third one?
Or getting fired from my first band.
Yeah, nice. Tell us about that. Yeah.
So it was a disagreement between myself and the 2 other members. So one of us something had to change, and it was me. And again, it came down to musical disagreements, basically, more than anything. So, and there was a lot of stern phone calls and a lot of stern emails sent back and forth and that, because we had 3 of us were living all around WA. So, rehearsals were once a month when we could all get together and then go and do gigs. And this was at a time period where our album was being nominated for, Blues Artist of the Year, up and coming Blues Artist of the Year or something for the Australian Music Blues Awards. So, and we're in the finals for that, and we're in the middle of fighting between bands, which happens in more bands than you know. So
yes, yeah,
and the creative differences got to the point where I thought, I don't know if I can do this, and I could see that the group had so much potential. And it did, because after us, the group went to America, and that was heartbreaking because I'd always wanted to go to America to play music. And so I left in the February of that year, and by July that year, they were confirmed to go on tour to America. But losing that position because of creative differences, it was frustrating. So, and the singer and myself sort of had a chat at one point and went, no, we can't do this. We can't continue. So, and then the view was basically either, I shouldn't say fired, because the view was either I would be fired or I have to quit, one of the two. When I made the decision that I'd walk away from it. So, and I had other projects that I was doing at the time as well. I've never been one to stay in one band at a point in time.
No, really?
No,
just do one thing at once, Jayden.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. So, and some people say that, as a musician, you should be in one band, but the challenge is you can't be in one band unless you're working full time in that band. So as a musician, there's never been a band that, at the end of the day, we've still got I've got a mortgage to pay, I've got car loans to pay, I've got bills to
Mm.
pay, and that. So unless that band can actually pay for me week to week to be able to do all that, I can't commit full time purely to that band. So, like at the moment, I'm doing one group, but there's 2 others in the pipeline. So, depending on what happens there, and even then, you manage it so that way you have things like group chats and calendars and emails and all that. So you can manage it and plan things in accord so that way no one gets their toes stepped on or there's no problems or anything like that. But that was definitely one where it felt like, okay, well, here's an opportunity where something could happen, but it's not going to happen. That's okay. Something else will happen. And then 5 months later, they're going to America. That was a kick in the gut. So, but it was also a moment where it was, okay, well, you've had this opportunity. It's taken away from you. Something else will come up. And something else was in development then, which probably leads to number 4, actually.
Yeah, go into that.
So I had a group called Blues Thieves at one point, which this sort of generated from the Southwest Blues Club house band Homebrew. And we had, when I joined the band, the saxophone player and the vocalist harmonica player were the 2 guys from that group that ended up being in Blues Thieves, with myself and another guitar player and another bass player.
Yep.
The guitar player used to study at MIT over in Los Angeles, and the bass player used to play with Johnny Diesel and Jimmy Barnes and that sort of thing. So we had some really good musos.
Yeah.
So here I am as a 21-year-old kid playing music with, these sorts of musicians. They all could be my dad's age, basically. Yeah. But they've all done it for so long. And so I'm there learning and I'm developing my skills in rehearsal every week. And then we're writing originals. And then I'm learning how to write originals from a band setting. Awesome. And then we're in the studio and we're recording in Perth, and we're there for a whole week, and we're doing our EP, and then we're doing live off the floor tracks, and then we're doing extra demos, and then we're doing video footage and all that. And so we've got this EP that we're all proud of, and we sit there and we go, there's 6 original tunes that we've all contributed to, we've all helped, we've all developed. And it happened over a 9-month period roughly, where we were not gigging whatsoever. We'd taken time off gigging with this group, and it was purely rehearsing to get together a set list for gigs, no problem, and get together some originals.
Yep.
Once we recorded it, back out there gigging. And at the end of the year, we had, 2-3 gigs a month. So it started to pick up on that.
Yeah, cool.
We then got picked up by an agency in America, a couple of radio stations in America, and a publication company in Turkey. We had a lot of people in Istanbul that really loved our music, which was pretty cool. So we had an in over in the Middle East, and we had an in America, and we had a lot of people starting to contact us going, hey, we want to look at doing something with you guys. Are you interested in potentially doing some tours or promotion or anything like that? We had an agent in Perth who was looking at something to come up to Perth for a week and do some gigs and then look at going over east. And so we had all these things starting to happen where something may happen, and it's never confirmed until it's confirmed with music.
I know, I'm the same in business. Yeah, you get all these, here's some ideas. I need to talk with you. I need to do this. And then only 10% work out, right? Yeah,
exactly. And that's where it was. There was a lot of things that were starting to happen. And we went, hang on, we could actually go away for 6 months and play music. This was becoming a real possibility. And then, just as fate would have it, the guitar player unfortunately went through a messy divorce at the same time.
No.
So his focus was on that and his kids and everything there. So we'd stopped playing together for a good 6 to 8 months, something like that. And every time they tried to contact us regarding something, we've got this issue we've got to worry about. And our role at the time was just to consolidate and help with Pete more than anything. It wasn't about music. It was, we've got to support him through this. So, and it was a messy one too. So, so music was second to him at that point as well. So, and by the time we got back together playing, some of us, myself excluded, the saxophone player excluded, we were playing in bands together, and the bass player as well. But some of us were mentally drained from what had happened. Some of us were not prepared when we got back. Some of us were unsure what was going to happen. And the first rehearsal was horrendous.
It was
shame. Really bad.
Probably lost that momentum too, right? Because it's a cohesive kind of thing when you get together and gig.
Correct. And even though the quality of musicians we had, it should have been good. But I think we all expected it would be what it was. But we hadn't done our homework in one sense in that. So, and we sat there and rehearsed, and we went, we can't do anything like this. And we had a gig booked for a couple of weeks' time, and we thought that's okay. We'll have a couple of rehearsals, get to the gig, no problems. And we sat there and we went, this is actually really poor. And it was quite disappointing what we sounded like and what we were doing. And we went, no, we need to walk away and see if this is something that we want to get back to and do eventually, because the view and the vibe in the room was, we're just here just to hang out. It wasn't to actually do what we did before, because we'd come off a period of time where I talk to Mike about it all the time. Mike was the bass player in it, and I get to gig with him in ESP nowadays. We keep going back to that, and to iFunk, another band we were in together, and saying we knew how to rehearse back then. You know, like we were so good that we'd go in a rehearsal room for 2 hours and somehow rehearse a 4-hour gig and come out perfect from it.
Yeah.
So just we had rehearsing down pat. So, and we've always been searching for a band that could do that. So and that rehearsal was just so horrendous that we walked out and went, we need to reevaluate things here. And then time went by, and then all of a sudden 3 years later we're contacting each other to try and work out if we can do something again. And hey, we've got this EP that was wonderful. We never actually launched it. It still holds up today even. And that was close to 10 years ago we did that now. So
okay.
But then for this reason, this person's unavailable. For this reason, this person's unavailable. But all 5 of us have said that if we ever did do it again, it's only with the 5 of us. We're not getting anyone to come in to replace or anything like that.
I love that camaraderie, that closeness, because that's what music does as well, though, doesn't it? It brings people together and it creates. I mean, your music school, you could say, is a family more
Very
than
much
not,
so,
right?
Yep. Because, you know, I talk to my staff during the week, not just, you know, when we're at work, but we're texting each other after hours and before hours. And, you know, it's not just about work and that sort of thing. You know, we're talking about, hey, let's catch up in a couple of weeks. This event's on, or, you know, we're sending each other funny memes and things like that. So, you know, we all hang out together too. So, you know, there is that family element to it as well. And a lot of our clients as well, we've known for years now. So we know about their family, their history, their students, their kids and all that sort of thing. So, and particularly some of our adult students that come in, we know a lot about, you know, their upbringings with music and that. So, you know, I've lost how many times that we've got students that have come in and said, you know, that these are people that are in their 50s, 60s, 70s that want to learn music and say, but I don't want to learn piano because when I was a kid, I used to play and the nuns would smack me across the hand and that with the cane. So, you know, there's so many of those stories that we've heard, and you know, we hear people's backgrounds. You know, my favorite one, we had a lady who came in just before her 90th birthday to learn how to play violin. And she said, but I'll never play piano again. And she had that same story and that. And she said, yep. So she said, I stopped playing music for 40 years. Wow. She said, I've finally gotten over it and I'm ready to play and I want to learn violin. And so her kids bought her a violin for her 90th birthday. She came in. The only reason she stopped lessons was because she was told she couldn't drive anymore. So, but she was loving it. And it was just that her upbringing, she had a good upbringing, but her musical upbringing was not good, like a lot of people back then. And so looking back on it, I think for me, Australian culture with music is a very, very unique one. And I look at the way that I hear these stories from people and go, well, that's probably why we've got such a big gap in terms of music education at times, is because a lot of people went, no, you don't need music because you're going to go and get smacked across the wrist when you do a bad job. So,
you know. And it's something I found that can't be forced. So I think you know this backstory, but the whole reason I took up violin, so Zoe was playing, Sabine said I could practice if I got a violin. So while she was doing lessons, so like, okay, I'll do that. Always up for a challenge. And I read the book by Carol Dweck called Mindset. And I realized when I read that, like, mindset's on a spectrum from fixed mindset to growth mindset, that because I had a lot of natural talent with things, I actually sat in the fixed mindset, right? So I would do things for the end game, not the journey. And once it got hard, I was like, next thing, right? So business is really a growth mindset. So I'm challenging it. But I thought I'll go do violin because that'll challenge my mindset, because it's not going to be easy and I'll have to practice. But I went so hard and I wasn't in flow that I ended up causing an almost frozen shoulder in my arm because of the way I held it. So you can't force music. It has to be something that flows. Yeah.
And it is something where no matter how good you get, there's always going to be someone better than you. You can always get better at what you do. So, you know, it's not something where there is an end game with it. So it always is a growth mindset. It's never that fixed that, you know, oh, I've completed how to learn violin, or I've completed piano, or I've completed drums. You can't complete it. You know, there's no such thing. There's no you get to the end result that doesn't exist. The end result is only what we've done so far, and then you've got to achieve beyond that, and that's where you're starting to create new things. If we did that with music, we wouldn't have anything other than the Renaissance music from the 1500s. That would be it. So you look at the way music's grown, particularly from the 20th century. There are so many different styles and different avenues of music nowadays. So we look at 20th century classical music, we look at jazz music, we look at different styles of contemporary music, from blues to Motown to soul to rock to metal to now pop, and then electronic music, and that's all developed through what we already know. That's not because we got to the end result and went, right, I know classical music, that's it. It's we learned something and we developed it and further grew it. So
and it's funny because I got challenged, and like you said, you can always be better at it, and there's always someone better. And someone challenged me when I was learning the violin. They're going, so when you do it, are you doing it to learn violin, or are you doing it to enjoy playing violin? And I'm like, oh, damn. So I was still, even though I was doing it, I was still in a fixed mindset, right? Because I wanted to learn it and I wanted to master it. So I ended up, I haven't played obviously for a while, but I can still pull out my ukulele and all that sort of stuff. So, and guitar and have a bit of a bang on that. So that we've got to 4. What would be your 5th? What would be the 5th thing that was a challenge that you're now grateful for?
Oh, 5th one's hard. Probably again. Actually, no, I've got one. I do have one. Yeah. It was losing the passion.
Okay.
I guess so. So a lot of people who know me musically and play with me musically know that towards the end of 2019, I got to a point where I just had enough.
Yeah.
And I remember doing a gig with the band I was playing in that time. And again, great group of people, great group of musicians, all people that I gigged with again. But I got to the point where I was so sick of it. It felt like a job playing music. So we got off stage at a gig in Breck, and we played 2 songs to sell out crowd at Breck, got paid good money for it. So it's like the easiest gig in the world. Yeah. And I just remember walking off stage going, if this is it, I'm happy. Yeah. And since then to the beginning of this year, I could count on my 2 hands the amount of gigs I'd done. I was knocking back gigs too. Yeah. It got to a point where I think in 2021, I had about just shy of 300 days between gigs. And I got to a gig and just remember setting up and then sitting there going, I don't want to play. I just want to sit here and listen and watch. Like, I don't want to do this. So, and it was weird because the people I was gigging with that night, Andrew Mackay-Sim, Steve Ellis, Michael Ellis, 3 guys that are all very good friends of mine, very good musos, work with for years at Ashes, just love everything we do. But I remember sitting there going, and I didn't tell them this, but I just remember sitting there going, I just want to sit here, have a beer and eat some food and watch you guys play. I don't want to do this. So, and it's again, nothing against them. And we're playing, jazz music, that's what we all studied at uni. So, it's what we want to do. Yeah. And I'm sitting there going, I don't want to do this. Yeah. And then we finished the gig and I had nothing else booked. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I really want to take another gig yet. Fast forward a couple of months later, one of my very, very good mates unfortunately took his own life, and he was the guitar player in a band iFunk that I was in. Yep. And iFunk had just talked recently prior to that about potentially doing something again in a couple of years, and I said, yeah, I'm not ready. In a few years we might do something. And after that happened, I remember going, no, this is it. I'm done. I've had enough. I'm not going to do this anymore. And I got to a point where I was knocking back gigs left, right, and center, and I wasn't playing, wasn't doing, had no motivation whatsoever to get out and gig. And I thought, look, Steve was, I consider Steve to be arguably one of the top 2 musos I've ever gigged with. His background was he played in his own original band in Canada. He was signed to EMI Records. They toured with the Ramones. He did a gig with Keith Richards. So his musical background was
next level. That's cool.
So yeah. And the best jam session I ever had was with Steve playing bass and Peter, the guitar player from Blues Thieves, who went through the divorce. The 3 of us just in a room one day playing music, and we rocked up, and no preparation, no nothing. We play the first song, 45 minutes later it stops, and then the two of them go, hey, let's try this. And I'm sitting there going, I'm in the presence of musical genius here.
Yeah.
So I remember it was just, we played 2 songs over the course of 3 hours, and I remember thinking, this needs to go somewhere. And it's the only time the 3 of us have ever got together. But this shows you how busy musos are. That was the first time we got together. We'd been talking about it for 3 years for that day to actually happen. So
for that to happen, yeah. Love
finally got there, and then all of us are the same. We went, because I'm sitting there going, you two are the 2 best musos I've hands down ever worked with, and I want to do something with this. And they're sitting there going, this could be something pretty cool. So and I just remember at Steve's funeral, it was, myself and the other iFunk guys gave a eulogy, and we spoke about our time together and our friendship and that. And we were all very, very close. But we were particularly close when Steve's wife and my wife would always say that the 2 of us were like brothers. So so I thought, I put that in a box and move on. My musical side's done. I'm now a teacher. I'm now a business owner. Let's not worry about playing music, because I've done everything I wanted to achieve. I'd been very happy with what I'd done. I'd gotten to the point where I was frustrated and over things, and hated gigging. I loved playing music, but the elements of gigging I hated. The pack up, the setup, and the drunken idiots in the front row. Hey, can I have a bash of your kit? And do you know any Jimmy Barnes? And when you're playing a song they don't know, they tell you to
you're shit
and stuff. So, exactly. So, we got that in the early days with iFunk, because we're playing soul music and that sort of thing. People didn't know it. We sucked, and then we realized we had to be better than everyone else, and people would dance, and it was fine. So and I remember after Steve's funeral turning to Mike and saying, I think I'm done. Like, this is an ending for music as well, because I'm never going to gig with great players like him again. And, we're never going to get those moments that we had, because we've got moments and stories that we'll remember forever, that as 21, 22, 23, I took for granted, and look back now and go, will I ever get again? So, so deciding that I'd already been mentally burnt out from it, and then losing one of my best mates, regardless of music, one of my best mates, and all the musical stuff we had together, I just thought, no, that's it. So, and it was only really because of Mike that I got back into playing music. So I have to credit him for that, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be playing music at the moment. So because I was knocking back gigs left, right, and center, until he called me up one day and was very, very desperate. And I was talking to him and said, I don't want to. He goes, no, come on, you can do it.
Yeah.
Jayden, it's easy. It's you and me. You can do this. Suck it up. Come and do the gig.
Do a favor for a brother. Come on.
And that's what it was. It was. I said to him, I said, oh, Mike, look, if it was anyone else, no, but because it's you, I'll say yes to it. And he just goes, good. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to be disappointed. What do you mean? And he hung the phone up. I went, he's got something in store. So, and I remember the next night we got to rehearsal, and the next night after was the gig, and I'm sitting in rehearsal. It sounds pretty good. And the 4th song in, I'm sitting there going, sounds really, really good. And then looking around the room, and then the pennies dropped who I'm actually working with. And Mike had told me about these great musos he'd hooked up with. And this guy used to play in the Eurythmics, and this guy used to tour Europe, and this guy used to do this, and this guy, and all these wonderful things. And I'm sitting there, and in the rehearsal, just gone, oh. And then I've turned and looked at Mike, and he's seen that the pennies dropped for me, and he's gone, see why I brought you here? So he's brought me to this rehearsal where there's all these wonderful musos, and I've just gone, I'm not worthy of being in this room here, and I want to make sure I'm worthy. So all of a sudden the spark's back, and I've gone, I want to do a good job for the gig tomorrow. We do the gig, and everyone's happy, and I'm sitting there going, I didn't think I did good enough, because I'm not practicing, I'm not playing, I'm not 3 months of doing nothing, basically, or it's probably close to 5 months of doing nothing at that point, like not picking the sticks up just in a teaching setting. That's it. I'm not even playing my own instrument at home. So, and then I get off stage at the gig, and Mike goes, what'd you feel? And I said, feel pretty crap. He said, oh, so what does that mean? I said, well, I need another go. I need to do it again. So
I didn't showcase my best. Bring me back.
Then all of a sudden it was, okay, there's that challenge there to get back to playing how I used to play, and then to feel worthy of playing with these musos. Because that was the other thing too, that, they were musos where I sat there and I went, this is like playing with Steve, because I'm sitting there going, they're so brilliant. I just want to play more and learn more on that. So.
And so to me, it sounds like, the gratitude for all those challenges is just opening a new door for you and a new experience. as you went through. And to me, it feels like when you lose that inner connection with that music is when you lose the interest in it. Would that be fair to say that?
Yeah, and it got to a point where it felt like it was just a job. I was going there just for a paycheck, so it wasn't a sense of fulfillment or purpose. So that's where it became lost a little bit. So, and I'd had a few things over the last couple of years of playing where, you know, I had shoulder problems and looked at needing surgery, and then you know, trying to manage starting a business and a new career in teaching and gigging, like all three silly to do.
Yeah.
Even though I do it nowadays, all three silly to do. But now I've had years of learning how to do it. So
and
you know, trying to all do it at once straight away. So, you know, I was only in my second year of actually teaching at that point, and only in the early stages of learning to be a business owner and that. So you can't do everything all at once. You have to grow and learn a bit by bit. So and taking that element away helped. I could focus on other things. But yeah, it got to a point where after that phone call and that gig with Mike, where the time started to change a little bit. So and this, in all fairness, this year was supposed to be my last gap year,
right?
From what I was telling people, and that lasted about 3 days. So there we are.
And you're back. So the last question I usually ask my guests is, you know, what daily, weekly, or monthly practices do they do to strengthen the connection with their inner self? Now, for me, I'm assuming that's going to be playing, gigging, teaching, or what sort of element? What is it that you do daily that actually makes you feel alive?
Go to work and enjoy it, basically. Like the only day I don't really work now is Sundays, and that's because I've got a lot of family commitments and that sort of thing as well. But even then, I've got a gig this Sunday and I've got a gig next Sunday, so you know, it changes too. So it's I have a real passion and a real love for what I do with teaching music and with a business owner in music and with gigging with music. Now all three are music based, but all three are very, very different. The teaching is education. You know, 50% of what I do is music based in that. 50% is all education and policies and administration and timetabling and scheduling and behavior management and, you know, preparation and planning and all that. So it's not just music anymore, it's everything. Business owner, I only teach students, I think, at the school now. We're pushing 280 students at the moment, I think. So, and I've only got 3 of them that I teach. Everything else is, you know, managing staff and leading staff and developing, you know, the next lot of what we do. We're currently working on a junior program where we've got training in place for that. We're looking at adding a band program at some point this term. We're adding in steps at the moment for a certificate 2 and 3 in music, so we can add qualifications in from 2024. So there's all these things we're doing and developing, which has to come from me stepping up and leading it and developing it and planning it and preparing it. And so doing all that, and only 1.5 hours a week, I'm actually doing something music related in the school. So everything else is business and administration. So, and then the gigging side of things, that is the pure music. But even then, you know, only 90% of it is music. So a lot of the gigs I'm getting at the moment is fill in and session work, which is great. But you know, I get a call as little as a day in advance to as much as 6 months in advance can be at times. So and with them, it's usually the end of the week, I get sent a set list. So for this weekend's gig, for example, Sunday evening, get sent a set list. Here's the repertoire. Here's the backing tracks. Here's the charts. Here's whatever it is. I've got the week to learn it. Go to the gig on the weekend. Play the gig. There's no rehearsals. There's the expectation that you're getting paid to do the job, so you know it. And you know, some of the musicians that I've been gigging with, Tess Merlot's a great one. She's worked all over Europe. She's from Denmark originally, and you know, she does all the gypsy jazz, French jazz sort of stuff, and her set list was intense because there's start, stops, tempo changes, ensemble hits, all that sort of stuff. So the week before, we get all the recordings of original work, we get the charts, and then we rock up, do a 1 hour rehearsal before a 3 hour gig just to top and tail things, then go and do the gig. This weekend with Emily, you know, in 2019, I think she was the coordinator and musical director for a Justin Timberlake gig at Berklee College of Music. So, you know, she's working at that sort of level, and I've been sent the set list and saying, here's what you got to do. You meet Emily on the day and then we play the gig. So it's just being able
pressure.
to...
No pressure.
No. So it's just being, you know, good enough as a musician that's the expectation. So, and, you know, a lot of people will ask the question, you know, how do you do that with no rehearsal? How do you... Last Friday's gig, same thing, you know, myself, Kevin and Steph playing together. Steph and myself met a couple of hours before the gig. Never met, never knew each other, anything like that. But the week before, we'd learnt the set list, we'd learnt the repertoire, we rocked up and we knew what we're supposed to do. And, you know, the people who hired us, you know, they said, you guys have been playing together for 10 years, haven't you? I'm like, no, we've just been playing together for the last hour, but, you know, you hired us to do a job. We're going to do that job.
Professionals.
That's the expectations. Yeah. So,
yeah.
And, you know, when people ask, how do you do that? Well, how do you do any other job? You learn it and you do it. You know, whether you're a plumber, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a lawyer, you learn the skills and you do it. That's what the skills are as a musician. If you're going to be a pro muso, you've got to know that you're not going to have rehearsals all the time. You're not going to meet the musicians until the gig at times, and you've got to go and do that gig, and you've got to do it at a professional level.
Yeah. And it feels like to me as well, and it sounds like and feels like that a lot of that is just that connection, right? It's being the right energy, being in the right vibe and the right scene. You can play together, you know. So I think that's really wonderful. So just lastly, before we finish up, if people want to find you, reach out to you, connect with you, how can they find Jayden?
JD's Music Tuition is the best, just because my day job at Ashes is government employment work and that sort of thing. And I'm there as a music teacher and arts operations coordinator and flat out with everything I do here. Whereas the school is a little bit more relaxed for me. You know, it's a hobby in one sense, that it's something I've wanted to do for a number of years and develop and see grow. And, you know, you can get in touch with me at the school. Not always. I'm only usually there Monday, Wednesdays and Saturdays nowadays. But, you know, if you get in touch with the school, phone or email, I'll get a notification to say, hey, this person wants to reach out or catch up or anything like that. And usually Saturday mornings are good because I'm usually turning the coffee machine on and coming in after a gig from the Friday night and whatnot. So come in, have a coffee. I'm not going to do too much work this morning. So Mondays and Wednesdays are a little bit more work orientated. Saturdays more, let's just say hi and catch up with people. So reach us at JD's Music Tuition, either on our Facebook page or through phone or email. And we're located at 27 Carey Street in Bunbury, developing retail at the moment, which, as you've seen recently, it's finally getting to where we wanted it to get to pre-COVID, before the world shut down and we couldn't get anything. So, it's nice to see things at the moment. Now we've gone, okay, even though COVID's not over, COVID's over as such. You know, the reasons for why you can't move on now, it doesn't exist. We can move forward. So, you know, we had a long period of time where we try and order retail things and they say, yep, in a year you can get it. And now it's not that case anymore. We can start getting things regularly, which is great. So, and even moving forward with what we want to do, we can do. So, come and see us at JD's Music Tuition, 27 Carey Street in Bunbury. And we've got a lot happening there, which is great. And I'm always happy to speak to people about music and music education and the way music's going and that sort of thing, and, you know, meet new musicians and meet new people and help people on their journey in life with music and that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you for being a guest today. It's been great.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for joining in and listening to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. It's been great having you here. And if you'd like to go and like and subscribe and maybe even leave a 5-star rating if you think it's worth it, I'd really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.